Hello, friends, welcome again. Friends, as the students of English literature, when we study modern literature, when we study the literature written during the first half of the 20th century, we come across different movements like Expressionism, Symbolism, Imagism, and so on. So friends, today in this video lecture, we want to understand this 20th century new movement which is known as Imagism. Friends, the dawn of 20th century, dawn means the morning, the beginning of the 20th century brings about a huge change, a drastic change in the field of English poetry. Okay, why? Because as I told you, some new poetic styles, some new movements are found in the field of English poetry in the beginning of the 20th century, and these new movements are symbolism, expressionism, okay, imagism, and so on. Okay, one among the most important poetic techniques which became very popular during this time was Imagism. Okay, this movement actually, if I give you the precise date, it began in 1909 and it ended in 1917. T.E. Hume, who is considered as an important modern English poet, when he publishes his two poems, A City Sunset and Autumn, with the publication of these two poems, it is believed that the beginning of a new movement called Imagism started in English literature. Why? Because these two poems are very innovative as far as poetic style is concerned. These two poems are full of the use of Imagism by T.E. Hume. Okay, now let's first of all try to understand what this movement is all about. Okay, as I told you, it is a 20th century new movement in poetry, and it was a reaction against the too much romanticism of the 19th century English poetry. We know that before modern era, before modern age, there was Victorian age, and before that there was Romantic revival. Okay, so during this period of Romantic revival from 1798 to 1830, and after that period, that means from 1830 till 1900, during this Victorian era and also during the period of New Romanticism, the poets were too much coloring their poems with too much romanticism, and this movement, Imagism, which began in the beginning of the 20th century, was a reaction against that romanticism. Okay, the poets who followed this movement of Imagism, they emphasized much on the use of clear and direct language. Okay, they were not satisfied or they were not happy with high romanticism or elaborative expression of the 19th century literature. Okay, they wanted to present the pictures with the least possible use of words. I mean, they wanted to say that with a very few words, the poet must be able to create pictures in the eyes of the readers. Okay, so their language was succinct. That means to say they wanted to say the things clearly in very few words. Okay, now if you go back to the 16th and 17th century, then there was a critic called Sir Philip Sidney. Okay, Sir Philip Sidney has written the definition of poetry. What is this definition? As you can see here on the screen, according to Sidney, poetry is an art of imitation. Fine, that we know. But now comes the important portion. He says that poetry is an art of imitation and it is a speaking picture with this end to teach and delight. Now, what is more important for us now is the phrase that poetry is a speaking picture. During the 16th and 17th century, Sir Philip Sidney, who himself was a poet, he believed he understood the importance of imagism in poetry. When he says that true poetry must be a speaking picture, okay, according to him, the poet must be able to create pictures, mental pictures in the eyes of the readers, okay. Not only Sidney, there were some other scholars, there were some other critics who also believed in this very popular dictum. This popular dictum says that poetry is a speaking picture and picture is a mute poetry. So here the critics, the scholars, they have compared two different arts, painting and poetry. According to them, the painter must be able to create that according to them, painting is a mute poetry. In painting there must be some rhythm, and according to them, poetry is a speaking picture, means poetry must be able to create pictures, okay. So imagism is all about creating visual images. Images means impressions, impressions means pictures, okay. So the basic idea of imagism is that poetry must be able to create some impressions in the mind of the reader, okay. That is true poetry according to those followers who are following imagism in English poetry. Okay, now what are the important features of imagism? Let's have a look at them. Okay, there are 4 to 5 important features. We'll discuss them one by one with examples. Number 1, though the followers of imagism, they use very simple language, okay, in order to make their poetry more effective, more appealing. These poets, they used very simple language. They used the language of the common man. They tried to avoid the verbosity or highly phraseological language, okay. They were different from metaphysical poets or even romantic or Victorian poets. Why? Because metaphysical poetry, they used very pedantic kind of language, high phraseological language, or very difficult kind of language. That's why imagist poetry is in sharp contrast to metaphysical poetry, also to romantic and Victorian poetry. Why? Because they preferred the use of very simple language of the common man, in which they can express their pictures in a clear, simple and direct manner. So this is the first feature of imagist poetry. Number 2, second element of imagist poetry is that the poets use 5 senses. Their poetry is sensuous, okay. 5 senses, I hope you understand. The sense of touch, the sense of hearing, okay, listening, the sense of seeing, sense of your vision, sense of smell and sense of taste, okay. So it is these 5 senses through which we understand this world, okay. So during this period, 20th century, the poets tried to express and present their ideas, their emotions in such a manner that it appeals our five senses. Okay. However, it is observed that the modern poets who followed Imagism, they mostly used the sense of vision. Okay. T.S. Eliot has used this image of vision, of seeing, in his famous poem Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Okay, you read these lines. These lines, when we read, a kind of a picture comes before our eyes. Let's read them. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. Okay, now the poet is talking to somebody. He says, let's go then, you and I, let's go together when. He is talking about the time period. Okay, when the evening is spread against the sky. Now, to describe this evening, the poet T.S. Eliot has used a simile, like a patient etherized upon a table. Okay, now you look at this picture. On the left hand side, the evening is spread against the sky, and on the right hand side, the patient is etherized upon a table. Okay, so it clearly reveals the psyche of the character. Okay, he is inactive. You know, the patient remains inactive and helpless. In the same manner, the poet wants to show that he is inactive and patient. So it is through the use of spatial words, that the poets of the 20th century, they try to create pictures in the eyes of the readers. Okay, let's take another example, a very famous example from William Wordsworth. William Wordsworth wrote a lyric. The title of that lyric is Daffodils. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Okay, when we read these lines, friends, undoubtedly, such picture comes before our eyes. The poet is describing himself that I wandered lonely as a cloud, just like a cloud, I was wandering. Okay, and all at once I saw a host of golden daffodils. The poet looks at, all of a sudden, the poet looks at 1,000 of daffodils before his eyes. So this picture he is trying to create with a spatial use of words, and this is an example of the use of imagism in English poetry. So friends, second important element of imagist poetry is to create visual pictures. Okay, the first one was to use very simple language. Number two, second one was to create visual pictures. Number three, these imagist poets, they used free verse. Free verse means they did not follow any pattern, they did not follow any style, they did not follow any rhythm, rhyme or meter. Okay, no rhythm, no rhyme and no meter. They wrote their poetry in free verse. What is free verse? That I have already prepared a video, another video. You can watch it in my channel later on. Here in imagist poetry, the poets does not try too much to arrange the words so as to create rhythm. They are not bothered about creating rhythm in their poetry. Their main focus here is to create visual pictures through their words. Okay, Now, Sylvia Plath, again another important modernist, an imagist poet of English language, English literature. You can see this example. These 4 lines I have taken from her poem. I didn't want any flowers. I only wanted to lie with my hands turned up, okay, and be utterly empty. How free it is, you have no idea how free. So this is how the poet tries to express her condition, okay. But here Sylvia Plath has not used any meter, no rhythm is found in these words, okay. So this is the third important characteristic. The first one was easy language, number 2 visual pictures, number 3 use of free words, no rhythm, no rhyme, no meter, and number 4 is brevity. Brevity means in short words the poet tries to express so many ideas, okay. Imagism, as I told you in the beginning, was a reaction against realism and against romanticism of the Victorian era, okay. Unlike romantic poetry, this modern 20th century poetry focused more on the precision and brevity, okay. They avoided roundabout ways of saying things. Sometimes what happens that the poet expresses the ideas in a roundabout manner. They use so many long sentences to express a very simple idea, okay. But instead, in imagist poetry, the poets try to express, they use exact words, even not nearly exact, but the exact words, and they avoided too much ornamental language. They did not use they did not use many figures of speech, so decorative words are avoided. Instead of that, they used exact words, okay. Japanese type of poetry, haiku, was also the result of this brevity of expression, okay. So you read these lines, this quotation: a true poem according to the imagist must be to the reader's mind what an image is to the retina of your eye at any given moment of perception. Perception means looking at. When you look at something, in your retina some image comes. So a true poem, according to these poets of the 20th century, they believed that a true poem must be an image to your retina, just as it actually happens when you look at something, right? So this is what Imagism is. I hope you understand these 4 important elements of imagist poetry. Now friends, before we conclude this discussion, let's have a look at some major imagist poets of English literature. Many critics believe that Imagism was not a movement or a doctrine. Why? But it is an association of few poets. There were a number of poets who made a group themselves, okay, and they concentrated on the expression of ideas and objects by creating various images in their poetry, okay. They were the outstanding imagist poets of the 20th century, and some of them, there were many, but most important of them are T.S. Eliot, Thomas Stearns Eliot, Ezra Pound, T.E. Hume, Sylvia Plath, Hilda Doolittle, F.S. Flint, okay, Carlos Williams, and many more, okay. So friends, let's conclude this discussion by saying that the movement of Imagism had a very deep influence in English poetry in the beginning of the 20th century, but it faded away very soon, okay. Why? Because the poets concentrated too much on the technique of creating visual pictures, and they actually ignored the subject matter. Why? Because in poetry, the subject matter, the content, the thought is also equally important, which was ignored by these imagist poets. Okay, that's why this imagist poetry did not last long, or this movement did not become too much popular later on in English literature. Okay, Stephen, an important scholar, he rightly says that it isolated the basic unit of the modern poem. Okay, but one thing is sure, that brevity means in short things, short words, short sentences, they expressed so many things. With the help of few words, they created pictures. So one thing is sure, that brevity and clarity of expression adopted by these poets heralded a new era of modern poetry in the 20th century. Friends, let's conclude by saying in the words of M.H. Abrams. M.H. Abrams has rightly remarked that Imagism was too restrictive to endure long as a concrete movement. According to him, it was not so popular that it lasted for a longer period of time. Okay, so it could not endure longer for a longer period of time, but this movement, Imagism, turned out to be the inauguration of modern poetry. Okay, modern poetry actually begins with this Imagism. So friends, I conclude this lecture here. If you have any doubts or queries, do write to me in the comment section of this channel. And friends, don't forget to share this video among all your classmates. Thank you very much.